This video is going to consider a couple more types of auctions, and then we'll wrap up with a summary of the different auctions that we've considered. First, let's think a little bit more about a reverse auction, an idea that we've seen earlier. This auction could be held in different ways, as I'll explain in a moment, but the basic idea, and the reason it's called a reverse auction, is that the winner is not going to be the one with the highest bid, but it's going to be the one with the lowest bid. So we can imagine a situation, let's say, in which a firm is looking for suppliers, and it wants suppliers to compete against each other to see who will offer the lowest price for its good or its service. For example, we could imagine the university looking for cleaning services, and it could put out bids, or could put out a request for bids, and it could see who is going to provide cleaning services at the best possible terms. A reverse auction can be conducted in different ways. One would be a sealed bid auction, as I've noted in the title. So in that case, the bidders would make their bids simultaneously. The values of the bids would not be known to the other bidders, as is typical in a sealed bid auction. It's also possible, though, to conduct this openly, perhaps even on the internet, as a live auction. So that would be something like an English auction, except the values would be decreasing instead of increasing, and whoever offered the lowest bid would be the winner. It could also be done, I suppose, as a Dutch auction, starting with a very low value that you wouldn't expect anybody to be willing to offer, and then the price could increase gradually until someone made a bid. Well, in this kind of auction, there is a danger of the winner's curse. If costs are uncertain, say costs of supplying the good or the service. So if the winner's curse is an issue, bidders are going to have to adjust their bids appropriately. In this case, they're going to have to adjust their bids upwards, because they would have to be careful to make sure that they were not underestimating their actual costs of carrying out the contract. I've made up this table, which I've provided just as a single page file in D2L that summarizes the main kinds of auctions that we've looked at. The English auction, the Vickrey auction, which we've just examined, that is essentially the same as the English auction. We've looked at the Dutch or descending price auction, and then its equivalent as a sealed bid auction, the first price sealed bid auction. So what we've done is we've examined the strategies that would be best for the bidders in each case. In the first two, we saw that no matter what, it made sense to bid up to your reservation price. We saw that the situation with the Dutch auction was a little more complicated. If you didn't care about risk, you would adjust your bid below your reservation price, depending on how much you thought other people were willing to bid. If, on the other hand, you were very risk averse, you would bid something much closer to your reservation price. So the strategy is rather different from that of the English auction. Well, I've summarized the outcome in terms of expected revenues here. If we compare the English and Dutch auctions, the Dutch auction might provide a little bit more revenues, depending on how risk-averse or risk-neutral the bidders are. So what can we conclude about expected revenues? We've seen earlier that in the case of the English auction, we can expect a price that is essentially the reservation price, which would be the bid, of the person with the second highest reservation price. Perhaps slightly above that if there's a small increment added to it, as in the case of the stamp example that we saw a moment ago. The Dutch auction, though, is a little bit more complicated. If the bidders are risk neutral, what they're trying to do is to estimate the second highest reservation price and to bid just slightly more than that, and in that way win the auction, but also get a little bit of surplus. Well, if they did that, that would really approximate the outcome of the English auction. If, however, the bidders are risk averse, then they're going to bid a bit higher than that. They're going to bid closer to their reservation price. So the price that would be received would be a little higher than the second highest reservation price. That's the argument that would say that if buyers are risk averse, the Dutch auction, or any auction that's equivalent to it, is going to raise a little bit more revenue on average than the English auction would. The final column that we've got here just summarizes a few miscellaneous points. So this concludes my discussion of auctions. It may seem like there's a great variety of these things, but really, as this table tries to summarize, we've really got two main types, the English auction and the Dutch auction. And we've got some types that are equivalent to it. So I think you should focus on the logic of the bidder strategy and in each of these auctions and the expected revenue outcomes, and make sure that you understand why the English and the Dutch auctions are effectively the same, except in the case where bidders are risk averse.